Herding cats, the cats being all those multiple metrics and accountabilities that we need to be responsible for. And the four speakers today are really adept at doing that, right? So you can see their institutions up there. Usually the presentations that come from our group of imaging people here at MCN have a lot to do with color control and technical things about cameras, lenses, et cetera. But I thought it might be an interesting thing to take a look at the administrative problems that we all face and some of the solutions that people have come up with. So I think those administrative issues fall into a couple categories. We all whine about funding. We're all responsible for keeping metrics. None of us have enough staff. We face institutions that are sending us conflicting priorities. And in many cases, we're sort of fighting for a voice at the big table to get recognition for our departments. And as I've said to people in the past, it's like when we're doing our job really well, nobody even thinks about us because the photographs just are there for everyone, right? And the time they think about the imaging department is usually when we screw up one way or another, right? So I think there are people here probably who are responsible for very large departments that have to be run almost like a small business. And there are probably people in the audience here who are from departments that are one or two people and sometimes really have to fight for recognition, especially when the studio's downstairs in the basement where it usually ends up. So when we put this panel together, my thought was to put together a group that represents both museums and libraries. And so we have two medium-sized museums, Dennehy and Shyam Oberoi are representing the museums, and then we have two university libraries. We have Stuart Snydman and Jeremy Moore representing those libraries. So I think the way I'd like to do this is to have each presenter speak and maybe take one question while the next person is setting up, and then we'll open it up to wide questions right after that. So without further ado, we'll start with Jeremy.
So as Erik said, and this is entitled, this presentation, it's cat herding. If that doesn't ring a bell for you, cats are not something you can herd, which is a lot of what ends up happening in a digital environment where, as Erik said, we've got multiple priorities and everybody is kind of fighting against the same sort of things. I'm now at Texas State University, but previously I was the digital imaging lab manager at the University of North Texas. When I started in 2007 at UNT, I had 4 student assistants. The following year it was 8 student assistants. That became 12, then an elastic number of 14 to 18. My staff consisted of myself. This was a large group of students for me to try to wrangle, and over the 7 years that I was there, we mostly functioned as a vendor for partner institutions across the state of Texas. By the time I left, we had over 250 partner institutions who would send materials to us, and we would basically perform as a vendor, digitize their materials, which would go into the Portal Texas history. I was trying to come up with a good number to give you just an idea of how much kind of ran through our systems. And because of the way we kind of pulled things from Born Digital stuff, in addition to adding on a newspaper digitization program later, it was hard to get just a singular number. But I know that my lab was responsible for digitizing hundreds of thousands of items comprising millions of images between the UNT Digital Library and the Portal Texas history. As of yesterday, there's over 13 million files between the UNT Digital Library and the Portal Texas history. Since at UNT we have a homegrown digital presence online, there's multiple programmers that were hired in, and we basically were a very young department. Both the dean and the project managers individually between metadata and myself with imaging. And so we kind of just hit the ground running and figured things out along the way. Because of that, there wasn't any sort of DAM system that we were using outside of just a local media wiki instance, what I kind of term action folders. And then I utilized Python scripting to take care of tracking metrics and finding out how things were going to go as things went on. With the media wiki, it broke down into 3 different basic sections. Student pages, as I said, I had a large number of student assistants. Project pages, which were based off of each literal project that came into the lab from our vendors, and then a huge section of tutorials, not necessarily for students to go step by step to use, but as a reference after they've been trained so that they didn't immediately have to say, hey, Jeremy, I need help. Student pages, each student received a page. Because I worked 40 hours a week, plus however much overtime I decided to spend, though we had students that were in the lab from 8:30 in the morning till 9 p.m. at night. So I would not be there, they would finish something, I would use it as a landing page for them to enter. First thing they would do whenever they would enter into the lab would be to check their email and then check their student page. If they finished a project, and I knew of this ahead of time, I would pre-pin projects for them, or there would be a co-located area where they could go, where any of the students, if they didn't have anything, could go find a section based off of what their skill sets they'd already been trained off and pull a project that they could start working on. Their student page would actually link to a current project plus individualized instruction. For instance, if a student I knew was weak in a certain area, it'd be a reminder to focus on X or Y. Or if I knew a particular project had fragile materials, it would, just a call to action to focus on and look at certain things. Email communication was only used for one-off things. Anytime a student would have to go back and refer to something over and over again, that's when they would hit their student wiki page. It was also a location for the students to take notes themselves. That's the great thing about wikis. Anybody and everybody can edit them. That's the even better thing about password-protected lockdown wikis, so that nobody else that you don't want to can edit your stuff. For project pages, it just pulled in all the necessary project info, so titles, important dates, institution and collection codes that were used to track things through the system, material transfer, when stuff arrived, when it was expected to leave, contact info for all of the priority individuals on the projects, so myself for imaging, the metadata lead, the people at the institution that sent materials to us. If there was any related project pages, for instance, if this was a sub-project within a greater head project, then those things would be brought together under a related project page. A project workflow just to lay things out for how people are going to work on things, and then an imaging workflow with instructions and a metadata workflow with instructions. Just kind of look like this. You would have students, they would all go into one project page that they were working on, and then you'd have a back and forth with tutorials as necessary for whatever was being worked on. Action folders, this was something that was literally on our SAN system. You would have a main folder that was named for the project. Then you would have folders within the main folder that are named for each step of the digitization workflow. And then digital objects themselves would move through the workflow folders as the steps were processed. So this looks like something as this, as opposed to what we would get from other institutions where they would use an Excel spreadsheet to kind of track where they were and going through things. Where if somebody goes through and modifies an Excel spreadsheet and somebody else tries to do it at the same time, a lot of times they break and you can't get them back. We didn't like that system at all, plus we like to be able to go to where the actual stuff was, know what to do with it without looking at something else. So everything that is in to scan is stuff to scan. If it's already been scanned, it moves someplace else. By actually creating the structure that we follow for our workflow and implementing the digital objects through the steps, anybody that looked at the system could immediately know where things were and what needed to go to it. Further, with this strict control of folder structures, and we had highly structured naming conventions, that allows for programmatic metric creation. This is also, if you are new to programming, it's a good introduction to programming because you're not moving anything, removing anything, or editing anything, so you can do a lot of practicing without breaking stuff. I'm a big fan of writing the code once and running it over and over. The big thing that for me fixed having to do the metrics as opposed to going out, doing this searching, going in, and just manually counting TIFFs, whether from Find in Finder or using Microsoft, was Python's OS. It's a module within Python, and within that's os.walk. It's fast. It's really, really fast for running through any folder structure or file system. It's also portable, so it does not matter what system you're on or the system that's holding your materials. By that I mean I've used os.walk at UNT where I was running a Windows box, but our servers were all Linux. And now at Texas State University, I'm on a Mac, so I'm running everything through terminal, and I'm hitting Windows 2008 servers. Those things are completely beside the fact, so that once you learn the skills in one place, you can use them anywhere. Plus, it can also be very simple. Of course, with programming, if it's something that looks like Chinese to you and you don't know Chinese, simple is kind of a poor choice of words to use. But this ends up being something very even easy for someone to parse. These are sections that need to be pulled in just because they end up getting used. So here we just have a counter. This goes through and this has the path that I want to go, the path that I want to find every single TIFF file in it. Then this is the whole thing for os.walk to go into this path, find all the TIFFs and give me a count. I can then take that and use that information that I grabbed to do lots of other things. I can expand this and also capture the time that I do at the same time that I do the walk and output that data to an HTML file. So this would be the code that you would use to write out to an HTML file. And you can also append it to a tab delimited file so you get changes over time. This is an example of that. We run it every single Friday, but then you'll see extra instances such as a Wednesday and a Monday where we needed to grab those numbers that day just to see where things were because somebody had a question about it. It pops it out to a very easy HTML page. This HTML page is a very basic one that we're using at Texas State because we are just starting a program there. And then all of these things can be taken back to the wiki. So if you want to track individual projects, you can pull specific folders with rapid reporting on project pages. So that HTML page could be linked to that wiki page to that project. Anybody that's anybody that is in charge of that project that needs to report on it can easily go through, grab that link, pull out that report at any time, which is current for the previous week. Very also easy to rerun the Python script to get up to the date. Additionally, we would use it to track individual student assistants by appending initials to folders for easy project tracking. And this, not only this, it would let me provide feedback to the students on, hey, 3 weeks ago, you were going gangbusters, but now we kind of find out that you're doing 10% of what you used to be doing. It lets you track problems and find them as they're going. Basically, we thought about metrics as an inherent part of the system as opposed to something that came after the fact. Expanding it further, you can combine os.walk with other Python built-ins and modules to check file sizes, creation and modification dates. A big one where I am now is file hashes before and after moving files across network shares to make sure there weren't copy errors. Additionally, if-then statements with ImageMagic's identify -format, which if you've never used is an amazing, wonderful tool to get any information that you can get from identify. So therefore, bit depth, resolution, image orientation, and either use that for metric information or as I prefer to do anytime I can, batch programmatic processing of images down the road. My example up there is, I don't know if anybody's ever used ScanTailor, but it outputs LZW TIFFs. At the University of North Texas, we needed to convert LZW into an uncompressed master format for archiving. But this was separated whether it was bitonal images that would then become group 4 compressed at a 600 pixels per inch, or are we going to keep grayscale and color? So at that point, I could do an if-then statement running through an entire folder, automatically process it out, and resize images and keep the compression as necessary. Previous to this, I was having to go through, separate them all out, do each individual one, and then bring them all back together again before I could check it, as opposed to it becoming a one-stop shop to process everything. If anybody's interested in getting started with stuff like this, I don't have any background or any academic training in computer programming. I just started using Code Academy, which has a very basic introduction to a number of programmatic languages. Google and Stack Overflow are your best friends. Stack Overflow, within usually 5 minutes, you get an answer to any question you have. And then I guess my big take home is, what are you doing every week? Or, if it's something that you're doing once a month, but it's a huge pain, if it's something you're doing over and over again, that's the best thing for the computer to do for you. Write the code once, and you just run it over and over. Thank you.
Is there a quick question for Jeremy? My question is not a question so much as I'm really encouraged to know that you were not trained as a programmer. I hear Python and it's like, oh, crap, I can't do that. But no, that's really encouraging. It's great. And the combination of Python and ImageMagick, there was an ImageMagick presentation earlier today that unfortunately was off schedule. And so a lot of people missed it. But that combination just sounds really powerful.
It's amazing.
It's great. Super. So our next speaker is Stuart Snydman. Stuart, as a reminder, because we don't have our, oh, you do have your title up there. There you go. So, Associate Director for Digital Strategy at Stanford. Thanks, Stuart.
Cool. So I'm not going to start the timer on that slide then.
Okay, no.
Because you've already got it. All right. All right. Hi. My name is Stuart Snydman, Associate Director for Digital Strategy at the Stanford University Libraries. And I've been managing the image digitization program for about 12 years now. Stanford University Libraries has about 13 branches. We've got 3 coordinate libraries. The med school, law school, and business school are a little bit separate from our central library program. We have 8 million items cataloged in our catalog, but presumably millions more uncatalogued items that are begging for digitization. We employ about 430 staff who have all been empowered to think creatively about the library in the digital age. Their appetite for digitization is voracious, and they keep us very busy. Our digitization program actually has 3 tiers. The imaging labs, which I'll talk about mostly today. We also have a robust media preservation program oriented towards digitizing and preserving audio, video, and film, and Born Digital Lab, which focuses on forensic capture of born digital materials, like CDs, floppy disks, hard drives, zip disks, things from the past that we want to archive and capture. Our team consists of 6 full-time professional staff, supported by about 120 hours a week of hourlies or casual staff. That number varies week to week, month to month, depending on the portfolio of projects in the labs. In terms of our equipment, we've got a diverse array of equipment in 6 different rooms on 5 different floors. Not ideal. We've got 3 phase 1 copy stand setups that are optimized for large format materials, rare books, and archival materials. We've got a robotic book scanner that we've had since 2002 for mass digitization of mostly circulating bound materials. It's still running. We have an Ateez Book Drive Pro that we use for digitizing semi-rare and non-rare books that can't go on the robot. We recently purchased a large format sheet feed scanner to kind of make some progress on our 300,000 map collection and our posters and other large format items. And we've got a variety of flatbeds, sheet feeders, and other kinds of devices for archival collections. Our program's mission, being housed at an academic research institution, is primarily to support kind of the research and teaching mission of the institution. So we really prioritize projects and collections that come to us by virtue of kind of faculty and student need. We do that by building out our digital collections, but our digitization program also supports other aspects of the library's operations, like public services, technical services and conservation, working with development to attract donors through digitization, direct support for research projects. So we kind of organize our activities in this kind of one unit around 4 different categories of services is the way we think about it. Projects, so This is the bulk of our business, right? Anything that takes up more than 20 hours a week, or 20 hours of work, typically we think of as a project. These are typically whole collections or parts of collections that have kind of a discrete identity and use. We also have a part of our work that is in support of one-off requests that come from patrons who want a singleton to support their research, or maybe it's a publication request. We've long had an ongoing program of systematic A to Z digitization. We started with the Google Books project, but we have an ongoing track of effort independent of our projects and our one-offs on working our way through our collection to digitize as much as we can. And we also acknowledge that we can't do it all, so we provide some consulting services to other departments in the library and outside the library. So if they're going to be doing imaging, you know, they're using best practices so that when we get the content back to preserve, it's in good shape. Our current portfolio of projects, either those in production, in planning, or proposed right now, is at around 35. So there's a lot of things brewing. So with that context, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges and a couple of solutions that we've implemented. So the biggest challenge that we face in a program of our kind of size and complexity is the number of threads that we're managing at any one time. We've got a lot of work coming to us from different sources, with different funding models, with different copyright implications, with different pressures, timelines, and with that come very high expectations. High expectations from faculty and library staff, both not only for the quality of the images, but also for the amount of time it takes for us to work through the collection. But we get varying levels of engagement from our stakeholders, to very engaged and participatory to not so much. Our program is not completely a cost recovery center, but we're also not fully funded. So we're constantly kind of nuancing the business models and the cost models to figure out how to fund the program to meet all of our goals. For a long time, our program operated kind of as a boutique operation, where projects would move forward and be successful because of strong working relationships that had a long history, and the way the process worked was understood via word of mouth or tacit knowledge. But we realized that the size and complexity of our program required that we kind of formalize a little bit. And we made an effort to move ourselves from a very project-based organization to trying to define digitization as a service. And what we meant by that was better defining our services and documenting them, engaging with our partners in slightly more formal ways, better articulating our costs with some level of specificity and predictability. We sought to get to something we call operational repeatability. So that is, not every project is a snowflake. That when we did similar projects with similar types of content, we were doing them in kind of similar ways. And we actually engaged in a little bit of what we called marketing and outreach as an imaging program. One of the techniques, I'm going to talk about two little techniques we use to move ourselves from the project to service-based model, where service level agreements is the first. So service level agreements kind of come from business, and they can be formal, if not contractual documents that define the rules of engagement for different products and services. We didn't go quite that formal, but our team spent our imaging team and some of our management spent about 3-4 months working together to define our services and produce formal documentation, both for our project services and our one-off services. So this is just the table of contents of the project SLA, and it does things like it defines actually the boundaries of what we consider a digitization project as opposed to something else. What is the process for submitting a proposal? So I'm a curator and I want to submit a proposal. How do I do it? What are the relative roles and responsibilities? The imaging staff are not the only ones who are implicated in a successful digitization project. Metadata unit, conservation, funders, stakeholders, copyright. We defined kind of those roles and responsibilities, raised some cautions and disclaimers about the risks, what could go wrong, red flags, some statements about copyright and how we do funding. And we documented these, and then we started to kind of pound the pavement, and we published them, went to meetings with different departments, and tried to get visibility and used the SLA as kind of our talking points. The benefits of this process of actually sitting down and documenting in this kind of formal way is it did achieve the goal of demystifying the process. There's a lot more understanding of what the digitization and imaging labs do and what the process looks like. And it encouraged better librarian engagement because we defined kind of the needs that we have of them and where the boundaries are between our work and the work of our partners. We created a common vocabulary for talking about digitization and imaging in the organization. And one of the really important benefits was the effect it had on our team's identity. Spending 3-4 months as a group every once in a while getting together and actually having to write this down kind of really gave the team a sense of ownership of the service. And it had a really interesting impact. A second technique or strategy that we've used to move ourselves to more of a service-based model is we produce formal cost and time estimates. So before a project, any project where work will begin, we actually produce and circulate a cost and time estimate. So 1 or 2 folks go out and they do an assessment of a collection, normal stuff, look at the project requirements, and then they sit down and they document an estimate, and this is just kind of pieces of an estimate, that will, with some attempt at precision, estimate the number of weeks, or months, or years a project might take. We do a work breakdown, so the different types of staff and the different steps in the process. We actually try to estimate the number of hours that each will take. It's kind of the math behind the estimate. We roll that up into a total cost estimate, which also includes some of the production management and project coordination costs that we incur. It's not a bill. It's not really intended to necessarily be a bill. But the goal here was to reflect the costs of digitization back to the organization, whether it's funded internally or by a grant or by a department, so that the institution gets an understanding and the leadership gets an understanding of what the costs of digitization are. And this is about raising visibility and raising understanding. So some of the benefits of producing cost estimates, this is the last slide, I'm doing great. Raising awareness for staff and the cost of digitization. So that actually happened, and in fact, having estimates up front also encourages fundraising, right? Where it might not have otherwise happened, we had a target, and we can go out and use this as a tool for raising some funds. It's a tool for future estimation. So we now have a backlog of estimates that we continually refine over time, so that somebody who might propose a project or want to understand a project can look at the backlog of estimates to kind of size their projects so they have a better understanding going in. It also gives the team a target. This is really motivational for the imaging team. They've actually said, this is going to take us 12 weeks. Well, there's your target. And it's actually had an effect on their motivation and productivity in the labs. At the end of every project, we do a retrospective, where the same person that did the estimate reports out what the actual costs were, and then we spend some time as a team looking at the delta. So why is it that this project cost more or cost less, took longer or was faster than we originally estimated? And then that helps us improve our process. It helps us account for some of those variances and situations in making future estimates. And ultimately, it makes us more predictable and makes us a little bit more efficient. So these are a couple of the strategies that we've tried to use to move ourselves into this more service-oriented paradigm to raise visibility of the program and better understanding. Happy to talk about it more during the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Do you have any quick question for Stu while Shyam is setting up? Yeah, Peter, just one. We'll just take one question now.
Yeah, Stuart, I know the figures are somewhat arbitrary, but what did you base that on? As far as, is it labor, is it
the one you look
cost
at?
of the repair of the machine, or?
Yeah, so we don't amortize the cost of the equipment in our estimates. So there's certain things that we as a program have decided to absorb, right? For example, as the manager of the group, I don't charge for my time. So it's mostly the staff time who are working on a project on a day-to-day basis. Now, we started this to try to manage resourcing within our imaging team. It turns out that groups like conservation, the folks that are responsible for the digital preservation storage infrastructure and others have looked at this and said, wow, we should do that too, right? Because it's right. So we haven't gotten to the point where we're creating, for really big projects where we're going for grant funding, we will do these holistic estimates because we have to, where the cost of storage and possibly the amortization cost of the equipment and software engineers and all that kind of good stuff goes in there. We've done this kind of in a little bit of a bubble as a start, but it's definitely generated something in the organization to say, hey, this isn't a bad idea and it's kind of working, so maybe we should kind of all get in on this.
So our next speaker is Shyam Oberoi. Shyam is Director of Technology and Digital Media here at the Dallas Museum of Art. He's an ex-New Yorker and a brand new Texan.
Thanks, Eric. So, you stole my introduction, so I'll just jump right into it. I think Eric mentioned at the very beginning, regardless of the size of an institution, whether it's a large institution, whether it's a small institution, we all basically are dealing with some of the same issues. We've got stakeholders like this who want stuff from us, right? And how do we go about fulfilling those requirements? How do we go about fulfilling those requests? And as Eric mentioned, I'm recently relocated from New York City to the Dallas Museum of Art, and when I arrived here, I was presented with this, where the DMA got a $9 million grant from an anonymous donor to fund digitization, support the free admission model, and to do the digitization of our entire collection. So in some ways, this is a great problem to have, obviously. I was going to go with the joke here about like more money, more problems, but that's not really true. It's always better to have money than not have money, right? But I mean, one of the things that we have to do with this, and this is partially for our own accountability, but also partially for the donor's accountability, is we have to keep very clear metrics over how we're spending this money. The money that we've been given to fund this digitization project covers a whole raft of activities, not just including digitization, also software infrastructure, hardware infrastructure, and a whole raft of other things. And so we needed to come up with a way internally for our own purposes, but also for reporting out, like how we're actually spending the money, how we're progressing as we go through this project. This is a 3 to 5 year project that we're engaged in. The very first part of that was allowed us to augment our existing staff. So we had started with 2 full-time photographers at the DMA, and we were allowed to hire 2 more. We have these positions for a total of 3 years. We have a new collections registrar, which when I get into the workflow, I'll explain a little bit about how all of these pieces fit together. But because we're embarking on a systematic digitization of our entire collection, almost all of which is on site but in storage in the basement in the building, we needed to come up with a way to sort of circulate this material through the building, get it, involve the curators in the process, involve art handlers, of which we have 4 new ones, to actually physically move all of this stuff and get it to the photographers for capture. So in terms of the staffing, and the asterisks here indicate the positions that were added as part of this project. We have 2 new collections photographers, an associate registrar, 4 art handlers. We also have a new application developer, and I'll get to that in a minute as well. And then we had our sort of existing staff, so we had to integrate this staff with our existing staff, which is our imaging services department, which I oversee. And then we have conservation, because we have conservation issues when we're bringing this stuff out of the cupboards and getting it out. Some of this stuff hasn't been touched in 20, 30 years. And we have our curators, because all of the curators have ideas about how they want this stuff to appear when we're doing it. I mentioned earlier, one of the great things about this project is it allowed us to purchase additional equipment. So I'm not going to go into all the specifics of the hardware that we've gotten for this project, but essentially we were able to purchase new cameras, lenses, lighting, hardware, Macs for the photographers, software, and also to create temporary studio space in our basement. We had an existing, and we're still using, photo studio in the basement of the DMA. We actually converted one of our storage facilities into 2 other photo stations where our photographers could work. In terms of our toolkit, what we're using in terms of software to identify the things that need to be photographed and then process the images that we're capturing as part of this process, we have a couple of different systems, one of which was already in place. So we use TMS, that's our collections management system. This is where we will go, or the curators will go, to review what are the objects that we need to sort of assemble into a package to feed to the photographers. And then we purchased a digital asset management system. We're using Piction. Their Piction folks are here. They're out in the exhibition hall. So this is a screenshot from Piction. So the images get shot by the photographers. They get into Piction with all of the metadata attached to it. We had to purchase a lot of storage. We're using a solution by a company called Exablocks. We actually have 2 100 terabyte rings that we've dedicated to this. 100 is on-site, 100 is off-site for disaster recovery. And then what we did to sort of pull all this together, and this is where our new software developer came in, is we set up this system called the Brain. And the Brain essentially aggregates the content from these other systems, from TMS, from Piction, into a single place where all of this content can be reviewed. So, for example, this is an object with all of the other versions of that object in the Brain. You'll notice over here that in addition to details and multiple views from the sides, we've also got, I don't know if you can really see it here, little indications that things are public or private, and a little green box which indicates that this is the primary view for that object. We've also, as part of the Brain, are extracting a lot of the technical information of these images that we're capturing. So right underneath the image we have the extracted colors, which allow us to do things like color searching, and then some other technical EXIF metadata. We created a tool for our curators and internal staff to use that will allow us to review all of the images for a particular object. So this is the object, this is all the images for this particular object, and it allows us here to sort of flag them in a number of different ways. We can say something is private, we don't want it to appear online, for example. We can flag it to say it needs to be cropped or it needs to be color corrected. We can set the order of them by just dragging and dropping them around the screen, and then we can indicate what we want to appear as the primary view on our website. I should mention that one of the main things that was driving this whole process is that the DMA had about half of its objects digitized, but it only had about 7,000 of its collection online. And part of our mandate as part of this project was not only just to photograph everything, but also to make sure it got on the website. In terms of what our workflow is, we start at the bottom left-hand corner there, where our internal staff, the people, our registrar, other staff will start and consult in Brain to identify what are the objects that have not yet been digitized. And we'll sort of try to group those together by types, by location. By location, I mean by physical storage. We want to get all of the things that are in this drawer and shoot them all at once, so we're not running around the building pulling different things out. By type, location, by curatorial department, by size, right? We want to set up a studio stand where we can photograph a lot of small things at a time or a lot of paintings at the same time. Once we've done that identification, the registrar will work with the curatorial departments to verify those objects. So we create these sets of objects, typically a few hundred in a set, which we will plan out weeks in advance. The imaging staff will then review all of those objects to confirm that we actually do need new photography. Like I said, some of this stuff has already been photographed before, so we're not going to photograph it again if we don't need to. And then the preparators will move the objects around. They'll find where they are in the building, stage them so they can be sort of laid out and examined, cleaned if they need to be unframed. And this also allows us to collect more information about some of these objects. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that hasn't ever been photographed, I mean, there's a reason why it hasn't been photographed before, because it's probably not considered to be, one of the highlights of the museum. So there hasn't been a lot of attention maybe to the object, to the information around that object. And this is an opportunity for us, while we have the thing out, to do things like confirm the measurements of it, right? Confirm the dimensions, look for additional inscriptions, things like that. Then the photographers will shoot and transfer the images to our dam, and then the images will appear by magic the next day. This is our website. This just went up. This is the online collection portion of our website. We launched this in August. Like I said, previous to this, we had about 7,000 objects online. Now we have the entire collection. We've got searching, all the facets. We're extracting metadata to do facets around the collection. And then this is that same object that we saw before. In terms of our project tracking, I see I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go quickly. Project tracking, we use a tool called Jira just to keep track of where everything is, but we also use Brain itself to give us information. Since Brain is harvesting all of this information, we have the raw numbers in terms of how many images we've shot on any given day. So this is just some charts that show on the bottom a weekly breakdown by curatorial department. This is color-coded by curatorial department, so we can see exactly how many objects have been digitized per curatorial department per week by that way. A different sort of graph, this is, I think, the amount of images. So we track both objects and images of those objects. So we may shoot 100 objects in a week, but if they're a complicated three-dimensional work, we may shoot 500 images for those objects, those 100 objects. We also had created, this is sort of recently a burn down chart, which, if you're familiar with sort of application development, this tells me how much time I have left until my project completes. This is a 3-year digitization project, so we've got an end date in mind, and we know the number of objects that we need to have digitized by that end date. So we want to keep track of it, right? We see this on my dashboard every morning, so I know how we're doing. And then we use things like Google Analytics to just track the amount of traffic that we've actually got on our online collection and the rest of our website. In terms of results to date, we started officially this project on May 5th, 2014. Since then, we've done 3,013 objects and 13,478 images, so that's about an average of 500 objects per month. I don't know if that's good or not, but it's on track with our estimate, right? We know that we have, like I said, around 12,000 objects that we need to digitize. If we do 500 objects a month, we'll be perfectly fine over 3 years. In terms of our online collection, we have our entire collection online now, as opposed to what had been 7,000 objects. We have images for 12,344 of those objects. We also have a bunch of other stuff like on-view status, gallery location, multiple images, including Zoom. You guys can check it out online. And right now, the online collection accounts for over 17% of all of our web traffic. Before, it was like a rounding error. So and as you would expect for a museum, it's a fair amount of our traffic. And that's it. Thank you.
Is there anything we need to clarify from Shyam? Yes,
Yes.
sure.
I'm curious about the brain.
Yes.
Because it seems to me, was that created before or after the asset management system was implemented? Because it seems like a lot of the workflow that you're doing in that can actually be done in the asset management system, as far as what gets sent to the web and marking something as primary and adding additional views, and a lot of the things that you showed are things that asset management systems do very well. So I'm wondering what the reasoning was behind having that additional thing.
So, I mean, the brain existed prior to our getting Piction, but we use it as the technical is a MongoDB, and so it's schemaless, and so we can harvest any number of sources into it, right? So it didn't matter to us whether we were using Piction, for example, or if we were going to use some other digital asset management system. We had a place where we could pull all of this information into a single spot. And for some of the other things, like setting the primary view or setting the order of images, more importantly, in my experience, a lot of digital asset management systems don't handle that well. I mean, you can do it, but it can be a little challenging, and so this was a little easier for us to, and a little more user-friendly in terms of the UI to allow us to do that kind of stuff. I mean, I think there's things that DAMs do extremely well, which Brain would not do, right? We don't have the original archival photography in there. We harvest a rendition, which we're going to push out onto the web. But there's others like tool sets and graphing and things like that that we could do in Brain that we just can't do in any of our other existing systems.
Great, thanks, Shyam. Okay, so next, our next speaker is Dan Dennehy from Minneapolis Institute of the Arts.
I'm just wondering why my screen is not up here. It was for everybody else.
Maybe it's the present.
We need to mirror. Are we set to mirror?
No, we were good a second ago. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Okay, well, sorry about that. Hi, folks. I'm Dan Dennehy, Head of Visual Resources, Senior Photographer at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, and I'm going to just take a moment to figure out this problem. So no, it has to be the connection. No, there it is. Okay. Oh, all right. I'll just go over here. It's funny, it worked for all the others. So here we go. Arrangement. Mirror display. Okay, there we go. Huh, I wonder how that changed. Okay, so let me just get rid of this stuff. So, there we go. Okay, so I'm calling my presentation From Obscura to Bravura, Professional Imaging in the Age of Instagram. And I want to talk about how we need to step out of the dark room, so to speak, and shine a light on the important work we do for our organizations. In a time when everyone has a camera in their pocket, collectively making over 1 billion images each day, the challenge is how do we educate our colleagues, especially decision makers, on the complex set of skills and considerable resources required to create high quality visual content, and remind them that not every picture is created instantaneously. A common perception that has haunted professional photographers at least since Edwin Land introduced the Polaroid camera. So that's my prepared remarks. Now I'm just going to tell you a little story about how we did it in our organization. Now, some of you are probably familiar with this term, visual resources. In fact, it's in a lot of our titles. Some departments name visual resources. It's a great name, but somehow it wasn't really empowering my team. It didn't make them feel like the awesome, cutting-edge image makers that they were. So we kind of created an alter ego for ourselves. And we came up with virtual racehorses, which made us feel a little more cutting edge. And we took as our mascot the seminal photographer, proto-father of cinema, Edward Muybridge, that great 19th century innovator who really advanced the medium. And we kind of put together a presentation for trustees and staff to kind of help them understand what it is we do, how we're organized, and what it takes to really get those pictures out there in front of them. So, of course, every branding campaign needs a motto, of course. So, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary next year. And we just let people know that, we've been around, we've been with your organization all along. And ever since then, pretty much any idea that people come up with has a picture that illustrates it. So, we play an integral part in communicating our message, who we are, to the community. So, primarily we're focused on art photography, and I like to think of it as sort of like we engage in the art of artifice. As image makers, we have a bag of tricks. We use cunning to make people believe that when they're looking at something like this, they're looking at the actual artwork, but of course, they're looking at a representation of it. We follow strict standards and do the best we can. But most people see just a primary image. Of course, with the advent of digital, we're doing more and more alternate views, and so the object doesn't have to come out again, so people can study it in depth. And of course, scientific photography to help conservators better understand the collection. And more we're getting into computational imaging, which requires, of course, more training and learning and constant exploration. Many of you are familiar with RTI, which everybody's really excited about in ways that we can examine surface textures. And then, of course, there's 3D, which, could, in a few short years, maybe even supplant what we do, when those 3D models are far much better than these, 2D representations that we're looking at now. So, the next thing, one aspect of what we do that is pretty invisible is what I call media flow, or the production stream, the post-camera production stream, all those things that happen after we take the picture, right? So, and that includes the still image and the video, images that we get from other organizations, and then the emerging technology. And everybody in this room knows that one really important step is the quality control, to make sure that when something leaves our studio and goes out into the world, that it's the best quality that we can produce. And we share these now in a variety of ways. There's catalogs, which we produce a number of a year. There's, of course, the website. We have a monthly iPad app that has replaced the Members magazine, and it's a great place for a lot of our content. Of course, there's third-party distributors like Google Art Project, and then we have more dynamic gallery didactics. This is part of a project that called TDX the Digital Experience, which just brings a lot more content to the visitor in the gallery. But of course, it requires a lot of visual support. Then there's old TMS, collections management system. And then there's social media, which seems to have a voracious appetite for new and fresh content every day. Keeps us busy. It's what we call the omni-channel approach. Just meet our audience on every avenue, and just any way we can get it out there, we do it. So most people wonder about this, well, how do you do all of that? How do you support all of those avenues? And we do this with a staff. We have a staff. I have a staff of 4 people, and we rely heavily on our systems. So currently, that's primarily our DAM system, which at this time is MediaBin. And without that, it would be very difficult to manage all of the media assets that we're creating and storing, many of which are not even collection images, but what we call non-collection images. And just year to date, we have over 16,000, and it's growing at a really rapid pace. Every year it seems to get bigger. So, but when people see our dams, really, they're not seeing everything. The assets in our dams are really only the tip of the iceberg. We have local production servers where we have all those component parts of the RTIs and layered Photoshop files, raw files, which amount to about 6,000 production files that we keep stored locally. And it's a lot of data. It's about 10 years of creative output. We don't want to lose it. We have to take care of it. So we have to carefully manage this through our life cycle. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of diligence doing it. Luckily, we have good people working to help us. And of course, like I said, it's growing and will keep growing. So the other aspect, which of the work we do we refer to as MIA Life, which is all those other things that happen around the organization. And it seems that more and more the marketing people are interested in engaging more of an audience. It's not just the art aficionados anymore. It's the experienced seekers and the people who want to connect socially. And so there's a demand for content which conveys all the fun things that we're doing and makes an emotional connection with our audience. And we use freelancers for a lot of this work, but we pull the content in and still manage it and process it ourselves. So we have control over it. It takes somebody, I don't know exactly how many rotations and exhibitions we had last year, but it was a lot, and it takes about a half-time person, 20 hours a week, just documenting all of the content that's rotating through the gallery. So we have that documentation. And of course, we're doing video now. We have a media production team that does the final products with the titles and the music. But my area, because a lot of this material is coming through the studio, and we have cameras that shoot video, we'll capture it there, and we're creating kind of like a stock library of video content that can be used for future purposes, because we're already engaged in creating imaging. Occasionally, we will create something more finished, like this was something for the conservation team when they were restoring this object. But I'll move on in the interest of time. And lastly, there's the archiving aspect of our work, which also tends to be, behind the curtain, so to speak. And it involves a lot of data management. If it wasn't for the robust metadata that we attach to these images, they wouldn't have the long-term value that they have, and it would be almost impossible to find anything. Luckily, we have a librarian, we sometimes call her on staff, who embeds a lot of data into the assets, and also helps, I don't know if you can see that on the left, helps create collections within the dams so users can find that content that we know there is in bigger demand without having to search. It's right in front of them. And you can see, if you can see on the right-hand column there, how much data is attached to the images. It's certainly a lot better than we used to do in the old slide days. But we did what we can then, and just in case people should realize that material hasn't gone away either. We're migrating all that old legacy material into digital and recataloging it. So last but not least, we do rights and reproductions. And while a lot of our collection is in the public domain, and we give that away to people freely, we have to carefully manage the data associated with rights-protected works, so that when it appears on our website, for instance, we're following the AMD guidelines and only presenting a small thumbnail of it. But one other tip, finally, is we created a page right in our Google, where people can access right from their Google browser within our own domain, that they can get an online form where they can request photography. They can find information about freelancers and permissions requests, and it helps them to engage with us, because when they fill out a form online, then that information just gets parsed into a spreadsheet that we look at each week and keep track of the requests that we're receiving. So I'll leave you with Edward Muybridge.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Dan. So are there questions in the audience, either for Dan or for the entire panel? And also, am I right, Heidi, that questions should go into that microphone? Is that, will they be picked up? Yeah. So we're recording the session, and we'd like to have the questions themselves. So if you wouldn't mind stepping up to the microphone, that would be great. Or maybe Heidi will pass it around. Even better. I know there were lots of hands before that we didn't get to. Are there any questions remaining? Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Can I go with the first question?
Oh, sure.
That's actually why I'm standing here.
Now I get it.
You said that there's 600,000 production files that are not in your asset management system, and I'm wondering why.
Well, because we really, in the asset management system, we only keep the working files.
Dan, would you speak into that microphone, please?
We only keep the working files that, for instance, well, MediaBin anyway doesn't play very well with 16-bit. Of course, we don't keep the raw in there. There are, you know, every time you make an RTI, you're going to have 40 plus images. We have some legacy content on CDs that we're still working through, and so not everything's made it in there yet.
So you just use it for finished images?
We just use it for finished images,
and
yeah.
then the production ones just live on a server separate?
Mhm.
And because you embed data in them, so you don't need to manage them in the software that helps you do that? I guess?
Well, you know, here's the thing. Running the dams is complicated, and we don't, at this point, we don't see any need. It's not like regular users need to access the raw files, for instance. We used to, as you know, when we worked, we used to keep the raw files in it, and then when we upgraded and migrated to MediaBin, we chose not to put them in because it didn't seem, we can manage them on our own on outside MediaBin, yeah. Yeah.
I have a question about managing those raw files. Do you ever, we do put our raw files into our DAM, and part of our thinking there is if we, say, notice a camera that has some idiosyncrasy that we had missed and want to go back and search on either a serial number or search on any piece of metadata that might help us identify the source.
Yeah.
Is that something that's of any concern, or do you have other ways
we do that
perhaps of
frequently.
doing
In
that?
fact, we frequently go back to the raw file and reprocess it out.
Right, right.
But, you know, we know where it is. We don't have any problem. We have, for all our collection material, we embed the object ID into that raw file.
Right, got it.
So we can pull it up anytime we want.
Great,
Yeah.
good. Great. There's another question. Someone's at the mic.
Yeah, this is for Shyam, is that correct? Shyam, sorry. We're actually just taking delivery of Fiction, and we're, as our director has said, have bypassed the past 20 years of digital technology in museums, so we're starting fresh. But two questions for you. Are you using Fiction or your brain to push out to your website?
So we're using Piction internally to organize our digital assets, but then we harvest from Piction to Brain, so we can tie our collections information from TMS with those assets. So Piction does not deliver directly to our website. If that answers your question.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
And the other question was, this is sort of a general thing, but your grant or your donation, what would you say the percentage of that went towards the digitization program?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would have to go back and look at the budget.
We have a similar situation where we have somebody that wants to buy in and they're willing to do what it takes, but they're sort of like, well,
I could guess. If I were to guess, I would probably say it would be maybe like 60% of it, but that's not all for photography. So I mean, that's for everything, right? That's for the gear, that's for the storage, that's for the software, that's for the staff, right? And then the rest of it is to support free admission in the museum, other sorts of activities like that. But the majority of it is in one way or another towards getting the collection digitized, getting it online, and building up sort of additional resources, electronic resources. So, I mean, what we've put up right now on our website is just the first iteration of that. We have a lot of other things that we want to do, which are going to, be forthcoming. I was in a presentation this morning when we were talking about the Rauschenberg scholarly catalog. Like, we're looking to do more deeper, richer types of experiences online, and part of that exploration is going to be funded by this project as well.
Hello, I'm Claire Bleckman. I'm the digital asset manager at the Peabody Essex Museum. And you'd said that 17% of your web traffic is to the collections. And I was wondering if anyone else had numbers as to how much of their traffic is for collections as well. Anyone?
That's a good question. Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you that, so before I was at the DMA, I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and it was probably like 25%, you know, and I think it's fairly typical for most museums that if you've got your entire collection online, you would expect that your visitors would be looking somewhere in the range of like maybe 15 to 30% of your traffic is going to go to your online collection. That's assuming that, you know, you're an art museum, you've got a sizable collection, and that's the sort of content that your visitors are looking for, right? I do remember that there was some numbers that were passed around recently by some other museums. I don't remember off the top of my head which they were, but I think that's probably a safe assumption. So if you were looking to make an argument or an expectation,
I am.
yeah, I think you would probably want to lowball it a little bit. You don't want to
Right.
oversell it.
Right.
I honestly thought it was going to be higher on than 17%. I thought it would be more like 25, but it's only been up for a couple of months, so it's not even fully indexed by Google. So.
Hi, I'm from the High Museum of Art, and my question I thought originally might just apply to the library guys, but I think it's museums as well. If we're considering digitizing our old catalogs, our old print catalogs, do you have any advice for that, for executing it and managing things like rights retrospectively? Maybe it's a different session.
No, maybe some of the library folks might have some thoughts on that.
That's a big question.
Yeah. It impresses me that the rights side of it is probably the hard part. Digitizing the catalogs is probably fairly straightforward with whatever workflow you would decide upon. Even a machine like Stu's robotic scanner could handle something like that because it's not a rare book. But the rights situation seems quite complicated. Yeah. Yeah. We need a whole session on that with a panel full of attorneys.
Right, both authors' rights and image rights.
Yeah, image rights and text rights in some cases. So if the museum itself doesn't own those text rights. Yeah.
How far back do the catalogs go?
1920s.
Okay, yeah.
From little pamphlets to our larger scale exhibition catalogs now.
Because there's a lot of rights issues beyond just the images. You have to deal with the authors and the writers and any work into the designer.
The design, right.
As well. So you know that there's conflict permissions issues.
Are these editions that you've published yourself, your institution, or that your library's acquired?
That we published.
Okay. I mean, it might be more straightforward than that. Then.
That makes it a lot.
It's a lot easier than if it's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of museums that have digitized, their backlist, right? The stuff they publish themselves. It's out of print, and they've just gone ahead and done it and given it, in some cases, to Google Books, for example.
Is your goal to show the images, or have the text kind of searchable in some way?
Or is it more like a reading room?
That's all up for consideration. We're just starting to bat this around and how we want to put the knowledge we've created out there. Yeah. And, having it be searchable. I mean, I'm sure we want to do some sort of OCR into the workflow. I don't know.
Digital Public Libraries, I know, did a group of our early publications, pamphlets, and things like that.
Yeah, and there's also the Hathi Trust. Am I pronouncing that right? I mean, I know they do digitization on behalf of other institutions.
What was that called again?
Hathi. Yeah, Haathi.
Right, and in that same vein, Internet Archive, is in the business of digitizing text material and then publishing it, and they're very open about their workflows and technology, and can create. If you don't have a lot of history digitizing books and textual material, they're a great resource to partner with as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Hi, I'm at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. I have a question for Dan, and it's sort of specific, but then maybe also we can broaden it out to everyone else. But my operation, my position mirrors yours very similarly, and we just recently dove into video. We'll have a videographer starting very soon. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you've integrated video into your studio workflows, and if you guys deal with marketing style video content as well, and then maybe broaden that out to see if anyone else has integrated any other sort of multimedia stuff into your workflows.
We're just starting to do that, and really, like I mentioned, we just consider ourselves more like stock shooters. So if an object is in the studio, and we have cameras that can shoot video already, we just try to just get some footage that our production team, could use down the line. Sometimes they'll request something specifically, also, but that's not exactly my specialty in terms of like the finished production part of it. Yeah.
Mine neither. That's kind of why I'm asking.
I think I learned that it's a whole nother set of skills, really. Right. I mean, we're good with the lighting part and the point of view, but at this point we just do short clips that can be used in larger productions.
Is there other people on your staff now that do that finished?
Yeah, we have a media production team that just focuses on video.
Are they in the marketing sort of?
They're in the well. I'll tell you. I'll take the opportunity to tell you that another good thing that happened to my group this year is we moved from we changed our place in the organizational chart, and we went from being in the curatorial division into being in the media and technology division, which has been a big bonus for us because now we're working more closely with people who really understand what we're doing and can directly help us, and we can work together closer. Whereas we were, having traditionally photo areas tended to be in the curatorial department because, the curators were basically producing catalogs and we were making the pictures. But over time, it became harder for them to really support us in the way that we needed to be supported and really fully understand the directions we needed to go in.
I don't mean to monopolize the mic here, but have you found other staff in the museum as you've started to produce this stock footage, the moving images? Has the demand for it increased, or has there been specific demand for it?
Yeah, there is an increased demand for it, yeah. And what we're also experimenting with just, social media, short 6-second,
Art
Vines and Instagram, yeah. But no, there is a demand, I think, because for the public, especially the younger public, still photography is not that interesting. They want to see it moving and talking. Yeah. And I think, you just see that's how people get information now. They go to YouTube instead of reading a book. Yeah, but I think it's coming.
Yeah.
So.
I want to add also that at MoMA we take a similar approach to what Dan's department is doing in terms of video, which is like we'll record a very informational video of a work almost entirely if it's either kinetic or has sound. We're not doing video of anything that stands still, actually, but it did seem like we were missing a lot in our documentation of these objects that are designed to move, and we were reducing them to still images. But we also do it in a very matter-of-fact documentation style. We try to capture enough of it, long enough clip that someone can then do something beautiful with it. But as we leave it, it's not beautiful. Yeah. And our photographers are not videographers, and it's just a very different skill. But like Dan is saying, you've got your Canon 5Ds there in the studio or whatever you might have, and perfectly capable of shooting a quick video clip.
Yeah, and video really is, a photographer can kind of do it all on his own or his or her own, more or less, but video is more collaborative, where there's a number of specialists working together.
Hey, Matt.
I'm Matt. I'm with the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. Dan, I'm really glad to hear about your recent reorg because we've had a similar one, and it's kind of the best of both worlds for us too. This question is for Shyam and maybe Stu. I'm curious about your use of Jira and whether or not you're tracking at like the item level or how you're leveraging that.
Yeah, so Matt, we're still, so we use Jira extensively, as you know, but we're not down to the item level in terms of kind of workflow steps and attributes. We remember I talked about the two sorts of business. We've got the project-based and the one-offs. We've got a little bit more granularity in Jira on the one-off, kind of item by item, but we've got, I think, something that's a little bit more like what Jeremy has, and maybe a little bit more like the brain, where our kind of lab manager, Tony, has kind of built homegrown software to track steps in the workflow and actions taken on objects during the workflow, and then it updates the status of that step in our asset management system. So now we can kind of see the history of an object in our asset management system as captured from the kind of homegrown scripts that we've got kind of on the back end. So Jira really is more of a project and issue management tool on the digitization side. Of course, we use it for the software development side a little bit differently, but on the digitization side, it's really just more at the high level, kind of at the job level.
Yeah, I would say for us, it's pretty much the same way. We don't use it to track the photography of every single object that's going through the digitization workflow. For that, we will just rely on the raw numbers that are going through, like on any given week. So we know from harvesting like how many things that we've shot, and because we have embedded in the same way the object ID in each one of those images, we know what the unique images of unique objects are for any given week. But for any other requests that we get, and part of our group is not just doing, collection photography. We do event photography, we do rights and reproductions requests, we do media production, and then we'll get any number of other sorts of ad hoc one-off requests. All of that stuff does go into Jira because I've got this large project that is just churning on in the background, and it's occupying a significant amount of resources in the department. I need to know what are all the other things that are happening as well. Right? And that's really the best way that I've found to sort of just keep an eye on that, because it's gotten way beyond the point where I can use something like Microsoft Project or Excel spreadsheets to keep track of it all.
So is someone manually moving those one-off requests into Jira, or do you have a system like a request form?
So yeah, Jira has a help desk portal to it where you can customize a request form, and so we've got, I think, 2 different request forms that we've pushed out. They're just very simple web pages. One is for rights and reproductions assistance, and one is for what we call sort of media production task, right, or request. Like I'm having an event next Saturday, and I need a photographer from 5 to 7, something like that. But so the requester will just fill in a simple web form, and that creates the ticket in Jira. Yep.
And then you track it in the brain thing, or you track it in?
No, that all gets tracked separately in Jira. And Jira has its own sort of graphing and analytics and charts that allow you to see sort of where things are.
So you use that for daily requests?
Yep.
Yeah, we use Jira a lot more heavily on an item-by-item basis for our request workflow than our big projects.
Yep.
You have any other questions out there? Oh, great. Well, I want to thank our panelists who each obviously did a lot of preparation. So thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming.